Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Where I'll turn your attention next to what I think increasingly is an issue that cuts to the very quick of the things that the country should be concerned with. Unfortunately, for reasons that we covered in the first hour of the programme, it's going to be a while before we can focus on the stuff that really matters. The stuff that is going to affect the freedom to actually get our house in order, because at the moment we don't know what house we're going to be living in. And I use the property analogy advisedly because this is a bit of research that's been undertaken into the amount of property in the environs of Grenfell Tower that is empty and is in the possession of very wealthy people, oligarchs, and I think there's an American politician on the list, and various other people possessed of so much money. I told you, didn't I? I always used to tell you about the pub around the corner. It's not there anymore. And I've worked in Leicester Square for the best part of a decade. It's not quite that long, so 6 or 7 years. And for most of that period, there was a rundown, completely abandoned pub just around the corner. Leicester Square is the sort of throbbing heart of London's fashionable Soho. And it must be among the most expensive real estate on the planet, mustn't it, really? Leicester Square, like Times Square, or commercial kind of real estate. And I could not understand why this pub was empty, because you'd think that you could get some rent for it, wouldn't you? I still don't quite get it, because you'd imagine if you were running that sort of fund, then you'd want some income. But I suppose if the sums of money are so huge that the 6-year rental income of a pub is not going to make the blindest bit of difference to your bottom line, then there wouldn't be a great impetus to put someone in it. I used to lobby the boss here to buy it. I thought it'd be a great thing. Go and buy the pub. We can have our own pub. It'd be brilliant with subsidised beer and stuff like that. But now it's been knocked down, and the land where it stood is part of a huge new development featuring hotels and restaurants and offices. And so now I know why it stood empty for 5 or 6 years, because it was it was an asset. It was a payday waiting to happen. You know, it's a bit like, is this analogy going to work? Some of my analogies have been a bit ropey lately. But if you've got a car, then you park it in the drive at night, because letting someone else use it as a minicab, although it might bring in a little bit of money, it just doesn't make sense to you to use your car to make money when you're not in it, does it? I think it's a bit like that. These people have got, these funds are so huge that the 5 or 6 year rental income of a pub in the middle of Leicester Square is negligible. Whereas the sale value or the redevelopment, if they've managed to buy up all the land around it and sold that plot to the developer who's building the office block and the hotel, that's megabucks. So that was my sort of, I sometimes come across things in life and use them as keys with which to unlock a better understanding of the world in which I live. It doesn't always work, and I may have got this one wrong. But that surely is what's gone on with these houses in Kensington and Chelsea. Michael Bloomberg owns one, the former mayor of New York. He's got a 7-bedroom house in Kensington and Chelsea worth 16 million quid. I guess there are some people, some private individuals who are so rich that it is worth spending 16 million quid on a place that you're only going to stay in for 2 weeks a year, and they're not running it as a business, so they don't have to get an income from it when they're not there, because they are so wealthy. And I prefer them to the sort of mindlessly greedy super rich who are constantly trying to screw a few more quid, like the story we heard the other day about the leaseholds and the freeholds that see very wealthy individuals owning, in one case, 40,000 individual freeholds for homes. So I get that, and there's part of me that says that's my house, whether I'm in it or not. You know, you can't come into my kitchen and take the milk out of my fridge, so there's no way you should be able to exercise any rules and regulations over my property ownership either. But I'll tell you when it changed. It changed when I found out how much compulsory purchasing is going on in the context of redevelopment. So how many councils are saying to people who've exercised their right to buy social housing that they have to move out because they're redeveloping the whole area. And if you want to move back in again, the new properties in the new development are going to be worth considerably more than you were paid for your old property in the old development. Of course they are. Otherwise they wouldn't be doing the redevelopment. There's money to be made. And then you look at HS2. This is where I get confused sometimes by Britain and by politics. Why is there any difference between the HS2 stories that we're hearing about people having their houses compulsorily purchased And the suggestion in Kensington and Chelsea that Jeremy Corbyn, I think, made immediately after the Grenfell Tower tragedy, that some of these unoccupied properties could be temporarily co-opted by the council or by government to house people who, at the time, were, well, I mean, on the night after the tragedy, they were sleeping on the lawn outside. And now a lot of them are put up in hotels and substandard accommodation, semi-permanent. Some of them have been offered flats which have got views of the carcass of Grenfell Tower. Some of them have been offered flats which have very similar architecture to Grenfell Tower. Some people haven't been able to go upstairs since the tragedy. They've been offered places on the 16th floor of a nearby tower block. There's all sorts of reasons why people aren't taking up these offers. Some of them don't even know that offers have been made. Some of them are too traumatised to answer their phone. Some of them are still desperately clinging to the hope that one of their family members might not be dead after all, so they don't want to say yes to a two-bedroom flat because they might need a third bedroom for the teenage boy who's still missing. There's so many reasons if you actually take the time to look into the facts rather than just reaching for the sort of laziest negative analysis available. And when Corbyn suggested that maybe some of these people could be put up in some of these properties, 1,652 unoccupied homes. I don't know, do we need to specify precisely what unoccupied means? If you're not even using it for the summer, I can see how Michael Bloomberg might come over and want to live on the fringes of Portobello Road for a 2-month stretch during the summer. It's a cracking place to be. If he's not even doing that, I mean, that's unoccupied, isn't part occupied. That is like literally they've bought that building because it was better value than gold bullion or shares. And when Jeremy Corbyn suggests that some of these desperate people could live in them for a while, everybody goes nuts. And yet when the same people 20 years ago managed to find the money to buy their own social housing, to buy their ex-council house, when they're told that they have to sell it and they have no choice, and they won't be able to afford to move back into the era, we're all silent. See what I mean? And then we have stories running on the news about people at Heathrow or HS2 today being told that their house has to be knocked down to make way for this new infrastructure project, and it feels grim and no one wants it to be them, but we don't really get up in arms about it. But we do somehow get up in arms when Jeremy Corbyn suggests that 1,652 unoccupied homes in Kensington and Chelsea could be used, at least in some way, to help accommodate the families rendered homeless by the Grenfell Tower fire. I'm not going mad, am I? That's an absolutely insane juxtaposition of circumstance. So Jeremy Corbyn suggests doing this thing. I didn't think it was wise or necessary. I think the council should be perfectly capable of housing all these people properly. But I'm interested in the public reaction to Jeremy Corbyn's suggestion that all of these empty homes could be used, and, you know, not just the usual suspects in the media, but a significant swathe, I think, of the British public automatically responded with a sense of injustice. And yet when the kind of people that lived in Grenfell Tower own their own properties and get told that they have to sell them because the council is redeveloping the whole area, we stay fairly silent. And that's just me thinking out loud, I'm sorry. It's not necessarily going to be the foundation stone for the question that I'm about to ask you. Partly because I don't know what the question is that I'm going to ask you. It's 11:29, I've got about 40 seconds to come up with one. Any thoughts? No, it's rubbish. I quite like this. Do you think... Because again, it's always the Queen and the Duke of Westminster that screw this one up, isn't it? Because I was about to say, should property ownership be different? Okay, what about empty properties? Should there be a law governing unoccupied properties, or would it simply be the case that if I was Michael Bloomberg and I owned a 16 million quid house in Chelsea because it represented a better return on my investment than gold bullion or the stock market, if we brought in a law now saying it has to be occupied, I'd just pay someone or I'd let someone live there for free? I don't know. I'd really like you to ring me and have a little think about this one. Should we have different laws governing unoccupied properties? And if you want to help me understand the other side of it, why does the British public, why do so many people respond to an invitation to get enraged by the idea of really rich oligarchs having their unoccupied homes in some way regulated, but stay silent when relatively poor people, albeit they're property owners, so they're above average, are ordered out of their homes? What's happened? That's Victorian, right? We're back to forelock tugging and sending kids up chimneys. Here's a bloke with a £16 million house. Left-wing politician suggests maybe we could put poor people in it because they've just been made homeless by the biggest peacetime disaster since the biggest peacetime disaster in the history of the United Kingdom. Tragedy. But maybe we could put some of those families in that rich guys. That's disgusting. They've worked hard for that house. If you didn't, here's someone who bought their council house 20 years ago. They've just been told they can have £450,000 for it. No questions asked. They've got to move out. If they want to move back in, they've got to find £800,000 to buy a property in the same plot of land that's been redeveloped, and everyone stays silent. Am I missing something? 0345 6060 973, or is it just that? I don't know, I just don't want to sound arrogant, but is it just that no one else points this stuff out? I mean, it's just nuts, right? Jeremy Corbyn says it's an empty, massive house, no one lives in it, it's owned by a rich bloke, maybe some poor people could live in it because they've just had their home burnt down, and everybody goes, oh, it's outrageous, communism. And then some people who aren't rich have their house compulsorily purchased to make way for a runway at Heathrow or a stretch of the HS2, or simply the redevelopment of an area so that the council and their friends in the development companies can fill their pockets. And everybody stays silent. I may need to come up with a better question. It is, as far as I can tell, properly vacant. We are talking about genuinely empty homes, not homes that are kept fully staffed and stocked throughout the year so that when a rich sort of Qatari decides that he wants to summer in Knightsbridge, their property's all ready for him. These are empty. These are not the ones that they spend summer in. These are the ones that they've bought because the returns are better than bullion or shares. And I kind of... just a bit baffled, I think, is the word I would use, about why, when Jeremy Corbyn and other Labour MPs called for some of the 1,652 unoccupied homes in Kensington and Chelsea to be perhaps requisitioned for victims of the Grenfell Tower fire, it was as if he'd sort of bared his buttock cheeks in public. The response from the right-wing media was so outraged. And yet, when people's houses are compulsorily purchased to make way for a luxurious new development in an area that was previously dominated by social housing, or indeed to build motorways or railway tracks like HS2, runways like at Heathrow, the same people stay silent. I don't know, I'm probably tilting at a windmill, but that seems to me to be a really I've got to write a newspaper column this afternoon, and don't be too clever with me, because at the moment that's the bridge I'm going to die on. This is a killer insight. It says something very profound about Britain, but I'm not sure what. If you say something really profound, I'll pass it off as my own and use it in the conclusion of the column that I'm writing for the Mirror. Mike's in Wandsworth. Mike, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Be profound.
I'm a chartered surveyor that deals with inner city valuations of compulsory purchase.
Okay.
I do some in the Elephant and Castle in Clapham, so I haven't really got any experience in the H2O thing. H2O.
What a laugh. No, but are you talking about stuff that's owned by, I mean, often has been bought under right to buy and ex-social housing?
Exactly. So it's people who have never really owned a property before. They've had one property in their life. They come along, the district valuer comes along, it gives them a price. Someone like me then comes along and represents them, trying to get a higher price for them. But
they've been told. I'm sorry to interrupt you, because you know a lot about this and I know nothing. So I want to clear dot some I's and cross some T's. These are people who have no choice. They have to sell their house because the council is Elephant Castle's the best example. That's one of those massive redevelopments has happened there. Is that's right? Is it? They have to sell.
Yes, they have to sell.
Because someone has waved a magic wand and decided that they're going to turn that old block of flats into a fancy pants new development, and the people who bought a flat in it, they have no rights.
They have no rights. And for the last 15 years, of course, the estate's been run down because no one wants to put any money into it.
Yep.
So they're at the point where they've got no rights. They're at the end of their wits. They want to move. They really need to move now because all their friends and family have moved.
Yeah.
And they will take the first offer. Now, I'll give you one instance, and I can't name names, but two neighbours recently in the Clapham development, one with an identical flat got 75,000 more than next door.
Because they hired you?
Because they were willing to hold out and hire someone and negotiate, be intimidated.
Oh, mate, this breaks my heart. Because you know what it goes hand in hand.
And you know it gets worse. It gets worse. Give some figures.
Yeah.
So one bed, they're going for, say, 275 they're being given, and they're now selling back to the people, new builds, at 450. And they can't afford it.
I kept thinking I'd misunderstood this.
No, you haven't at all. You've got it spot on. You talked about it the other day.
Only because of Grenfell. Only because I was down at Grenfell Tower and people were telling me that they were in this situation, and I was a bit. I don't know. I was a bit. On, I
tell you, you're spot on, James. And it gets worse. It gets worse. And there's an even bigger scam that when they even sell on the new builds, I go and do the valuation for the new builds, and they always advertise as 10% more than they are. So these people who can afford to buy back in are buying smaller places.
It's incredible, isn't it?
It's a scam, and where he goes, coming down from the Jeremy Corbyn, I'm not sure, but all I want to say is that someone up there is making a lot of money on this.
And they've got this idea out there. I wonder whether it's this notion. I'm trying to understand, and I'm in that difficult situation that I often find myself in, where I've probably been a little bit too rude about the mindset here that allows this to happen. The people who are listening and going, yeah, I thought Jeremy Corbyn was outrageous, and I've been completely silent about compulsory purchases for houses for poorer people. God, I'm precisely the sort of hypocrite that James is describing. I've been too rude about you for you to ring in and talk me through why you think you've ended up in that place where you get cross about Jeremy Corbyn suggesting an empty house owned by a billionaire should have some poor homeless people from Grenfell Tower put in it, but you're utterly silent and unmoved by the stories like Mike's. If you are in that category, please call me. Because what I think, Mike, is that this notion that hard work makes you rich is at the root of a lot of these problems. The hardest workers I know are often the poorest people I know. This idea that we've managed to sort of get out there, it's hard work that makes you rich. So if they've got a £16 million house and they want to leave it empty, that's a reward for all the hard work that they've done. And I sort of think, tell that to someone putting in 16-hour shifts a week.
They work no harder than these guys that I'm doing shifts with 3 kids that I'm doing evaluations for.
Well, they work less hard because they're doing a job they love.
Exactly. They don't, literally. And I have to see these guys at like 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning, because they've got to go to work.
Yes.
Got to be at work or they're going to get sacked. So, but bringing it back, there is a whole, James, there's a scam going on with this, with the compulsory purchase. There really is. And as I was saying to your researcher, I probably think, of course, if they could hire barristers, they'd give them more money.
Yes, of course they would.
They can't.
No, and then we're back to legal aid and similar issues that we've been discussing as well. It's people like you that I hate, Mike. People like you that I come here and I think I'm sounding a bit daft, and I put out an analysis of what I think is happening in the country, and it sounds to me like a breakneck return to Victorian values, and then someone who actually knows what they're talking about comes on and completely agrees with me. It breaks my heart, Mike, every day.
You're spot on.
Oh, God.
You're spot on.
I don't want to be.
Seriously, and I know, but we've got to be. This is bigger than you think it is, I tell you.
Well, I'm beginning to...
And if you just investigated one estate and then kind of worked out the figures, millions and millions and millions and millions is being made by somebody, the developer and whoever's above them.
And absolutely none of it is going into the pockets of the people living there, cheering for this sort of stuff to go on and booing when Jeremy Corbyn suggests that having a 16 million empty house is somehow, what's the word I'm looking for? It's morally wrong, sounds a little bit over the top, but that's the best I've got at the moment. Mike, thank you. Keep information coming my way. Anything you think I should know about. I haven't watched this film a lot of you have recommended. I think it's narrated by Maxine Peake, who I heard on a different radio station yesterday discussing Ellen Wilkinson, the Manchester. Actually, I think she was from Salford, wasn't she, Ellen Wilkinson? And I spent 3 of the best summers of my life in Ellen Wilkinson High School in Manchester, the Manchester Youth Theatre, without knowing that she was a sort of left-wing crusader, female MP, and at a time when being a female MP was rare, let alone being a socialist crusader. And Maxine Peake has done the voiceover for this film called Dispossession. I think it highlights some of the stuff that Mike and I are talking about. Matt's been in touch. An excellent question. It shows that it's more acceptable for government to use its powers to line the pockets of the rich than to help the poor. And that is really a message that could have come in response to almost any subject that we've discussed in the last few months politically. Brexit aside, genuinely Brexit aside, because I don't think that applies to Brexit at all. Well, we don't even know what the government position is yet. Everything else that we discuss, it seems to always boil down to people who are being punished by a policy, cheering for it, somehow persuading people who are on the losing side that they're on the winning side. So you will get people who run the risk of having their ex-council house compulsorily purchased for a sum of money that won't come close to allowing them to buy a new home in the new development. And they will be at the front of the queue of people condemning suggestions that Jeremy Corbyn's home should be. Jeremy Corbyn's suggestion that massive mansions or, smallish flats, it's a £16 million house, you don't know what sort of family you'd put in that. But there's just, do you ever get that feeling, that phrase on the tip of your tongue? Do you ever get the feeling that there's some big kind of enlightenment just out of your reach, some sense of clarity that would explain all of the stuff that we've just been discussing? Because it's hard to do it without sounding patronising, isn't it? How can anybody boo Jeremy Corbyn when he says that some of these empty houses should be used to put people in, but stay completely silent when people who own their home are told they have to flog it for a figure that, you know, unless you hire someone like Mike, for a figure that they'll determine and decide, and you just clear out, and you can never come back, because the stuff that we're building where your flat used to be is going to be way out of your price range, you pleb. We're going to flog it to an overseas investor who's never even going to live there. And then you sort of wonder whether it is just a succession of circumstance or whether there is some sort of malevolent master plan. I don't know anymore. Oligarchs and royalty who keep homes empty in shadow of Grenfell. Even the Daily Mail puts a vaguely disapproving headline upon it. And I just sometimes, well, increasingly actually, as I get older, I struggle to understand how we let this stuff happen under our noses. It can't all be down to media influence, because the media doesn't enjoy anything like the influence that it used to do. And then you make the mistake of reading something like The Ragged-Trousered Philanthropist from the first or second decade of the last century, and you realise that actually nothing ever really changes. What the Second World War did was, I think, create a scenario. It's oddly why Labour won in 45, despite the fact that Churchill had just essentially led the United Kingdom to victory in the Second World War. There was no way that people were going to come back from that war and be treated like they had been before. So as a direct result of winning the Second World War, we got the two. I know socialist has become a dirty word, and in many ways rightly so. You're never going to have properly equal distribution of wealth. It completely ignores human nature. But you can have equal access to massive, massive institutions. Winning the Second World War gave us the NHS and the welfare state. Period. Fact. Absolutely solid. Historical fact. There's no earthly way any government could have got away with treating ordinary working people like they were treated before the Second World War. What's happening now? Well, you tell me what the attitudes are among hard right-wingers towards the NHS. They'll even use the plight of a tragic, tragic situation like Charlie Gard to push forward their ludicrous political agendas. One of the most disgusting things we've seen in this country in recent years is American and a couple of kind of tin pot British politicians jumping on that poor baby's case to try and make points about single-payer health services. They hate it, hate the NHS, hate the welfare state, because it treats ordinary working people with proper respect. Only earthly way in which you're ever going to undermine the NHS or the welfare state is by convincing ordinary working people that the welfare state and the NHS don't benefit them. And in America, of course, the Republican Party is still chomping at the bit to repeal Obamacare, because they find the idea of access to healthcare for poor people being somehow subsidised by rich people, or even, if you heard Fox News the other day, one commentator saying, well, this means that people who are healthy are going to be paying for the healthcare of people who are sick. And they present that to people as a bad thing, because somewhere inside us we all go, well, I'm healthy, I don't want to be paying for sick people. It's the same as saying, with regard to taxes or insurance, that people whose houses aren't on fire are paying for the fire engine that's just putting out the fire in the house over the road that is on fire. Why am I paying? My house isn't on fire. Why am I paying for the fire engines? And that, for me, has been the most depressing discovery of the last couple of years. I keep waiting at the age of 45 for my lurch to the right that everybody tells me is on the way. As you get older, you'll move to the right. And I kind of look at issues like that and look at American politics and think, no, you really do. Every single day see that very vested interest, very, very wealthy people, all the billionaires who supported Brexit, persuading people to act against their own interest. And that is the heart of politics. So why are the NHS and the welfare state at the top of the hit list of the Daily Mail and sundry other organisations? Well, it's obvious. Can't make any money out of it. Same with black taxis. Can't make any money out of it. Investors can't make any money out of it. We've got to get rid of it. Look at that flat there. It's got a poor person living in it. That person there, that flat they live in, they're only on 25 grand a year, but because they bought it 20 years ago, the flat they're in is worth 450. Well, we'll buy it, we'll chuck them out, we'll make them live with all the other poor people, and we'll build a posh flat there instead, and then an investor can buy it. Because there aren't enough rich people to go around anymore, which is why there are 1,652 unoccupied properties in Kensington and Chelsea. It's the same rich people buying the property, more and more and more and more of it. And when Jeremy Corbyn suggests, hey, these people who've just lost family members and neighbours in the most grisly circumstances imaginable and are currently being put up in tin pot hotels, miles from where they live, miles from their children's school, maybe some of them could live in these empty mansions? Disgusting communist. Why don't you go back to Venezuela where you belong? Next day, people who've bought their ex-council homes, or people who happen to live in the path of HS2, or people who happen to live on the fringes of Heathrow, they get their compulsory purchase orders through their door. And all the people who are furious with Jeremy Corbyn and telling him to go back to Venezuela for even suggesting some form of requisition or compulsory purchase, zip their lips and stay silent. Now, is that because they just don't see it? Phone lines are full, actually. I should shut up and start listening, shouldn't I? I genuinely, you can tell from my voice, it's a bizarre mixture of academic fascination. It's almost like a psychological experiment. How do you persuade people to punch themselves in their face? And yet, at the same time, once they've been punched in the face and the bruise has formed, how come they're cheering for other people to be punched in the face rather than cheering for the puncher to be punished? Strange times. Linda's in Chelsea. Linda, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James. Thank you for taking my call. I actually wrote to you at LBC on Friday about our situation. I live on the Ebury Bridge estate, and we took a vote in 2013 whether to redevelop the estate, which I actually voted against.
Yes.
But the council have had 4 years to organise a redevelopment, and they have now just announced it's not economically viable.
This is Kensington and Chelsea, isn't it, if it's Ebury?
This is Westminster.
Oh, Westminster, I beg your pardon, sorry.
We're on the actual border. If
I
you
thought
walk
so.
across the road, it's Casey.
Got me.
But we are literally, as I look out of my window now, I see the Chelsea Barracks development.
Yes.
It's on public record that they gave £90 million to Westminster, and they don't like having a council estate in their view. I mean, it's clearly obvious that there's intention to, we feel, socially cleanse the area. We have new builds all around us, and we have an extraordinarily valuable piece of land.
Yes.
And the council have not done major works for 18 years on our blocks. They've moved out over 100 households, which are now boarded up with grills. So, people are being told, well, you could have the right to return, but even if you own your property, as you said, it's going to be double the price eventually if we tell you can come back again.
So,
I mean, the situation is dire.
And you're not alone. The other examples I've been hearing about, not confined to London, but obviously the real estate there is far more expensive than anywhere else in the country. I shall dig out your email. I apologise, Linda, for, I get so many that I can't.
Of course.
But I'll dig yours out. I'll do a search under your name and cross-reference it with Ebury, because that will bring it up to the top. I'll have a look at it after the show. But can I ask you a sort of personal rather than a political question?
Absolutely.
As you suffer in silence in this way, as you open your front door in the morning and see this epic crime against justice, not necessarily, obviously nothing illegal, but it's a crime against, decency, unfolding in front of you, and most of the world remains silent. And then as soon as Jeremy Corbyn suggests that maybe some people who've been rendered homeless by the biggest tragedy this country has seen outside war could live in some of these empty mansions, the whole world is screaming their disapproval. What do you think explains that curious conundrum?
Well, I think it's very difficult to force people who've bought their property to let other people occupy it. I'm going to be absolutely frank about that.
But that's what your neighbours have been told they have to do.
In what way?
Well, the property, I mean, admittedly, it's no longer theirs, but they've been ordered to sell it.
Well, in my understanding, because we're not really just being helpless, we're being actually very active in forming a residents' association and trying to oppose this. It's not very easy to get a compulsory purchase order. Apparently, it has to be signed by the Secretary of State.
Well, you pull it off.
It has to be proven that you've done absolutely every single thing to deal with it in any other way. So I know the HS2 situation has been discussed, but as far as our Ebury Bridge estate is concerned, there are many residents who've been here for 35 years plus, and there's a good mix of people who've bought their property.
No, of course. I lived on the Queen's Park estate previously, which is another little bit of Westminster that borders onto Kensington and Chelsea territory, and the diversity is absolutely epic. It's fantastic. But you, I think, if I understood you correctly, you were close to being part of the problem that I'm describing. You feel there is something fundamentally unjust about a very rich person's empty house being requisitioned to put homeless people in, people rendered homeless by Grenfell Tower, not by chaotic lives or anything like that. That just sticks in your craw in a way. And yet my challenge as a journalist is to make people feel the pain of your plight.
Mm.
Do you see what I mean?
Well, I live in an area which is full of empty properties because
but that's not what's making that's not making you cross.
Well, I'm not saying it doesn't make me cross. However,
they're rich people and they've worked hard for their money, and it would be wrong to take their property off them.
I'm not sure how you go about doing it. No, I live in an area which is full of empty properties.
Yeah,
you go past extraordinarily.
I know exactly where you are. I know exactly where you are.
Like Ebury Gardens has just been refurbished, and it's virtually full of investor flats. I think it's a very, very, very strong thing to force people out of those properties. But to be honest,
but your poorer neighbours.
Me and my neighbours.
Well, I know you are, but that's the point about principles, isn't it? That's a really lovely call. I promise I'll dig out your email, and I'm so grateful to you for being so honest. I'll see what light we can possibly shine on the situation you find yourself in. But you've highlighted what, for me, is the biggest problem, the problem that goes way beyond your home and your estate, right into the fabric of the nation, which is, no, something feels a little bit wrong about taking an empty house, and using it to help temporarily, possibly even permanently. Why can't you compulsory purchase one of these houses for a price set by the government if you can compulsory purchase a house on Linda's estate? And that creates a backlash, and Linda feels the backlash while simultaneously trying to get people interested in her own plight, which is essentially much poorer people being told that they have to suck it up.